With the release of Citadelle de Morts in Black Ops 6 Zombies, I thought this would be a great time to rank every single DLC 1 map in Call of Duty Zombies history. We have a total of 11 maps to go through here. We are not including anything from Modern Warfare Zombies because they technically didn't really have DLC maps, they just had DLC updates to the main experience that was there at launch. So let's just get right into this ranking. In the 11th spot is going to be Terra Maledicta from Vanguard Zombies. At least this map was a slight improvement over Duran Fong, but it still was a terrible map. This map continues what Duran Fong did by doing this mode where it's not really traditional round based, and rather the way you get through the rounds is by doing these very repetitive objectives in different locations by taking teleporters to them through the main hub area. And in general, that sort of gameplay flow is just not good whatsoever. There is pretty much nothing fun about it whatsoever, but I do think it's slightly better than Duran Fong because at least it had a mini Easter egg quest and an original wonder weapon, that being the Decimator Shield. And the Decimator Shield is kind of cool. It's a decent wonder weapon. It's not like the best ever, obviously, but it has a really cool design to it, so I'll give them that. And they also added a brand new boss enemy on this map called Zabala, and she is an interesting boss. I don't think she's a great boss by any means, but I actually think she's probably the best designed boss in Vanguard Zombies. The map location itself is also incredibly disappointing because this map is actually supposed to take place in Egypt, and we've been wanting a map in Egypt for so long. Obviously, technically 9 from Black Ops 4 takes place in Egypt as well, but we've been wanting a map that has that Egyptian pyramid vibe to it, and this map doesn't do that whatsoever. It just is this random dig site in Egypt that doesn't have any sort of interesting mysteries to discover. Everything is just so plain and bland, and that is pretty much the experience you're going to be getting on Terra Maledicta most of the time. This map was just a terrible DLC 1 because the launch map was already bad enough, and then to get hit with this right after with the first DLC, that was a painful thing for Vanguard Zombies. This game could have saved itself if its first DLC map was decent, but unfortunately because it was almost just as bad as Duran Fong, it just completely killed this game and basically put a nail in its coffin, even if the other DLC maps later on were actually not that bad. In the 10th spot is going to be Outbreak from Advanced Warfare. So of course, Exo Zombies didn't have a launch map, so the first map for the game was DLC 1. And I do respect this map for what it was. It was the first non-Treyarch Zombies map, and I was always in favor of the other studios trying out zombies. A lot of people at the time just weren't. They were so against the idea of any other studio even touching zombies, and I really didn't understand it because it wasn't taking away from Treyarch Zombies whatsoever. Treyarch was still working on their next Zombies title. This just allowed us to get more content in between the Treyarch games, and they were very different takes on the mode as well, and I would say Advanced Warfare was definitely a very different take. Now with that being said, it didn't do a very good job at it because this map just wasn't that great. Now there was some fun things about it. I do think the Stealth Recarterizer wonder weapon is really interesting. That was fun to mess around with, and the main quest wasn't that bad of an attempt for the first ever main quest in a non-Treyarch game. It was very much similar to any other quest we've seen in like Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2, so it was pretty much on board with what we usually had at the time. And I thought it was okay. There was a couple steps in there I didn't really like too much, like the one where you have to just spam shoot the floor and the trash chute. That step sucked, but a lot of the other steps were totally fine. But where the map really fails is the actual mechanics itself of Exo Zombies. Stuff like the Pack-a-Punch system, the fact that you have to upgrade a gun 20 times and it barely feels like it's getting upgraded each time, that really sucks. And if you want to be able to upgrade it fully to the level 25 that you can upgrade it to, you have to do the full Easter egg, which I do like the idea of giving Easter egg rewards, but the problem is the fact that the weapon just never feels like it's actually getting upgraded through the tiers. It just feels like it's getting a very slim buff each time you upgrade it, which is not how Pack-a-Punch should be. And then obviously you have other things like the EMZ zombies, which absolutely rip any fun that you can possibly have out of Exo Zombies. Like the early rounds on this map is honestly not that bad. Like the first 10-15 rounds, they're honestly okay. But once you get past that, it's just a miserable experience because you're just non-stop getting EMZ'd again and again and again. So in general, this map really could have been solid if the game just had better mechanics to it to begin with. I also think it would have helped a lot if this map wasn't a DLC map and instead was just on the disc for the game itself, or at least was given for free post-launch, because you kind of have this different level of expectation for a map when you're paying for it, and the map just does not live up to that whatsoever. The map location itself is also very boring. It's just at this Atlas facility. There's like nothing else interesting about it. Not a big fan of this map whatsoever, but it's not absolutely horrible. It's just not not great. In the number 9 spot, I've got Verrucht from World at War. I really do hate to put it this low on the list because I don't think this is a bad map by any means. It's just very bare bones, and that's just not the type of experience I like out of Call of Duty Zombies. But obviously, for its time, it was incredible. It did so much for the Zombies game mode because it was the first map to introduce perk machines. That was obviously the main thing it introduced. It also had traps that they introduced as well, and the power switch. Like, these are all things that end up being really integral parts of the Zombies experience going forward. So you have to give it credit there, but at the end of the day, it's not a map I'm ever going to revisit that frequently because it doesn't really give you that many unique experiences each time. It's pretty much the same thing every time. You do the same thing to get to the power, you hit the box until you get decent weapons, and then you train around until you die because it's a pretty difficult map. It's not that easy to get to high rounds on, and I just don't think that bare bones experience is what I like out of Zombies. It hasn't been since like 2009, so I just don't really think this map deserves to be ranked much higher than this, even if it is obviously a very important and impactful map. I do really like the creepy atmosphere of the map though. I think it's definitely one of the scariest Zombies maps ever, so you have to give it credit there. And when it comes to the remakes of the map that came out later down the line in Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 3, they're fine. They're not really that amazing or anything like that, but they exist. In number 8 spot, I've got the Darkest Shore from COD World War II Zombies. This map is one that I've really debated over time if I actually like it, because there are some really fun moments you can have on this map, but there's also some absolutely terrible things that just kind of strip away any enjoyment you can have with it. It's a really conflicting map for me. One of my favorite things about this map is actually the wonder weapon, which is of course the Ripsaw. The Ripsaw is really, really unique. You get to shoot out these buzz saws out of this launcher weapon, and then you could also use it with a melee attack as well. There's a lot of different steps in the Easter egg where you have to use it, but it's just overall a really useful wonder weapon that doesn't actually take up a weapon slot. It takes up your dedicated melee weapon slot, which is something that of course we're seeing again in Black Ops 6 with the swords on Citadelle, but this was the first time it happened was actually on this map, and it was really, really awesome because you could still have two other weapons and have a wonder weapon on top of that where you can pull it out whenever the hell you want. It's just a really awesome system. And I also actually kind of like the fog on this map, which might be a crazy thing to say because I know fog is one of those things that a lot of players just don't enjoy in Call of Duty Zombies. They always say it's a negative for certain maps. I think fog sometimes creates an interesting gameplay perspective where you now have to deal with a very different environment that is a lot harder because you can't see that far ahead of you. And the fog isn't always there on the map. Obviously, it only comes every now and then, but I actually think it works. We see this on some other maps as well. I don't mind it. I don't think it's this terrible mechanic. I think it's kind of fun. Now, is the map itself visually interesting otherwise? No, it is a very boring looking map. It is one of the grayest, most bland looking maps you can ever play, and that's just unfortunate. Obviously, the other World War II maps do a much better job with this. They have a much better color palette to it. This map just didn't do that for me. It just looks very boring. As for the main quest, I would actually make the argument that this is one of the hardest main Easter egg quests of all time, especially for solo players. And I do like that. I like the fact that it is very difficult to complete, even when you've already done it multiple times. You're not going to be able to just hop on this game and easily run through the Easter egg. It's going to give you some trouble. It's not going to be an easy thing. But my issue is that not all of this difficulty is difficult in a fun way. Now, some of it is. I will say there's one step early in the Easter egg where you have to do this lockdown sequence, and you have to turn these valves to put out the fire. It's actually a really fun step. It's pretty challenging, but it's really, really fun. And then you're greeted with one of the coolest animations I've ever seen in a Zombies map, where this gate literally rips open someone. Like, that was such an insane and gory moment, probably the goriest thing ever in COD Zombies. So that was really, really cool. And there's a couple other steps I do like. I like the step where you have to shoot the cannons at the boats. Like, stuff like that's actually kind of interesting. But then there's some steps later in the Easter egg, like where you have to get a spine from the main boss zombie, which is of course the Mushler. It is a very difficult thing to do, but not really in a way that's fun whatsoever for me personally. I actually just get frustrated doing it, and that does pull back the Easter egg a little bit. It also has quite a lackluster boss fight. It's not really a boss fight. You're just fighting a bunch of super powered moishlers basically, and I don't think it's particularly that interesting. The moishlers themselves as boss zombies I don't really like because they're really, really fast, and they're also really, really powerful and have a lot of health. So they're really annoying to fight against. They're not the type of bosses that have interesting, fun mechanics. They're just annoying. They look really cool though. They have an incredible design to them. Overall, it is a shame that the Darkest Shore ended up not being a great map for DLC 1 of this game because the launch was really strong, and I feel like a lot of players just stopped playing COD World War II after the Darkest Shore released, and they just didn't have any faith in the rest of the DLC season. But there were some other good maps in the DLC season, so I do wish a lot of players decided to stick around, but unfortunately many of them did not. In number 7 spot is going to be Die Rise from Black Ops 2, a map that I honestly think is quite underrated, even if I don't necessarily think it's that good of a map, but I don't think it's this absolute travesty that so many people make it out to be. It's usually in people's like bottom 5 maps of all time. I don't think it's that bad. There's quite a lot of redeemable qualities about this map. One of those main things is, of course, the Soliquifier Wonder Weapon. This is one of the coolest wonder weapons we've ever seen in Call of Duty. It is so powerful. It is so fun to use. The fact that the zombies slip and slide on it, and even you can slip and slide on it as well. It's a really unique wonder weapon. It's pretty easy to get. You just have to find the 4 parts around the map and then build it. It's very simple, but it is very useful. Another thing about this map that I absolutely love is the special rounds with the jumping jacks. You can actually get a free perk out of these guys if you manage to get 100% accuracy on these rounds, meaning you don't miss a single shot with your weapons. Now, obviously, the best way to do this is just to not shoot your gun at all and just use your melee weapon, which is what most people end up doing on this map. They either get the Bowie knife or the Galvan knuckles, and then you get a free perk every single special round, basically. It's really cool. And I actually quite like the visuals on this map. Not all of it. There are definitely some ugly areas of this map, but especially when you're on the rooftop of that main building, it looks absolutely incredible, especially the skybox and the dragon. They all look so awesome. And then the Buddha room as well. Like, there's a lot of places on this map that look visually really cool and take a lot of inspiration from Chinese culture. The map layout is where this map really does fall short, though. It is a very annoying map to get around, especially waiting for the elevators. There's definitely a certain charm to that, but at the end of the day, it can be very frustrating, especially when you're just waiting for like 3 minutes just to get the elevator to come down and finally pick you up and bring you to that floor you need to get to. The brand new perk was Who's Who, which is easily one of the worst perks of all time, so we definitely didn't get any new interesting additions to this map with that perk. And the main Easter egg is really lackluster. One of the worst Easter eggs of all time, I would say. There's a couple of interesting steps in it with like the Mahjong tiles, but most of it absolutely sucks. I do think this map was an improvement over the launch map of Black Ops 2. Obviously, this is better than Transit, but as a DLC 1, it just wasn't good enough to get people that excited for the rest of Black Ops 2's DLC season, and thankfully the map after this actually was able to accomplish that. In the number 6 spot is going to be Firebase Z. Now, Firebase Z, I think, is the definition of an average map. It doesn't really do that many things that horribly, but it also doesn't really do many things that great either. It's just average all around. I've always wanted to see a map in Vietnam. I thought that was really exciting, but honestly, they don't do much with the idea of a zombies map in Vietnam because it's all in this very generic military base. The only actual interesting areas of the map are the like outskirt areas, the different locations you could go to do the generators, and they actually have cool vibes to them. I actually like how like the forests look and the trees and the skybox. All that stuff actually looks pretty cool, but when it comes to the actual like middle area of the map where it's just a bunch of military bases and facilities, it is very bland and boring. The Ray K is a very powerful wonder weapon. It's obviously very useful, but I don't particularly think it's that interesting of a wonder weapon. It's not that fun to use, which honestly, I would rather take a wonder weapon that's not that great, but is really fun to use over a wonder weapon that's really great, but is just not that fun to use. I think one of this map's biggest flaws is the fact that it's just not unique enough from Die Machine. I mean, this has been a problem for most of modern zombies, but I felt like Firebase Z was just really bad with this, especially because it was the first DLC, and I was expecting something that's going to set itself apart quite a lot from the launch map, and I just don't think Firebase Z managed that whatsoever. It has a lot of the similar things Die Machine has, just carries them over, very similar mechanics, very similar features. The only difference is it's a different map location with a different Easter egg and a different story, and the obvious things like a different wonder weapon. And when it comes to new boss enemies, I really am not a big fan of the Mimic. I don't think it's like a terrible boss necessarily, but I think it can be kind of frustrating to fight against. It's not particularly that interesting either. The Manglers were also brought back on this map. Of course, the last time we saw them at this point was on Garad Krovi, and at this point, the Manglers weren't completely overused just yet, so I was completely okay with them returning here, and they actually make the map a bit better in my opinion because they're kind of fun on this map. The Easter egg quest is definitely the weakest in Black Ops Cold War because there's a lot of steps that just aren't fun to do, especially the step where you have to trap mimics inside of those little essence traps. The main issue with this step is that sometimes I like to play the game without health bars on, and unfortunately, you're basically just not going to be able to do the step without health bars on, because you have to make sure the Mimic is down to a certain amount of health to make this step work. And obviously, if you don't have health bars, you can't easily tell how much health the Mimic has. So I think it's just a weirdly designed step because of that. And then this all leads to a boss fight that I think is one of the most underwhelming boss fights in Call of Duty Zombies history. It takes maybe less than a minute to actually kill this boss, especially if you're using something like Ring of Fire or just the right powerful weapons. You will absolutely take down the Orda very, very easily. But one thing I actually do really like about Firebase Z that I think is an underrated feature about the map is the objective rounds. Now, every now and then you will have these objective rounds where you have to actually go and defend a certain area of the map from a horde of zombies. It usually happens, I believe, like every 15 rounds or so. It's not that frequent. It's not like it happens every 5 rounds. But when it does happen, I actually think it's quite interesting, especially because at a certain point in the game, usually around round 30, you will have to actually do a boss fight against the Orda. And I actually think this boss against the Orda is better than the main Easter egg boss fight against the Orda. Also, that's another reason why I don't like the main boss fight for this map, because you already get to fight the Orda in the map itself even before doing the Easter egg. I also really don't like the side quests on this map. I don't like the side quests in most of the modern Call of Duty Zombies maps, but there's literally a side Easter egg on this map where the reward is simply just making it so the jump pads are free instead of 500 points. Like, that is one of the weirdest rewards you can possibly give for an Easter egg, and the Easter egg quest itself is actually not very simple to do. You have to play this like Just Dance type game with the jump pad machines, and it's very easy to mess it up, and like I said, the reward is just not worth it. There's also a Monkey Bomb upgrade quest, which I love that reward. It's cool to be able to upgrade the monkey bombs, but actually doing the quest itself is very glitchy and finicky. I've tried it so many times where it just doesn't work. You just have to get kills with monkey bombs in specific areas of the map, and it's basically only happened to me like 10% of the time, because most of the time it just doesn't work. I don't really understand this step fully. Maybe it's a skill issue, who knows, but it just doesn't work most of the time. All in all, Firebase Z is just a very average map in a very average zombies game, in my opinion. Cracking into the top 5, I've got Ascension from Black Ops 1. We are finally at maps that I would consider to be pretty good, and Ascension is easily one of the best pre-Mob of the Dead maps. Obviously, it's a very bare bones map like most of the maps before Mob of the Dead were, but I think the actual gameplay and the survival aspects of Ascension are actually pretty good and some of the best from Black Ops 1. This map saw the introduction of Stamina Up and PhD Flopper, which are obviously two of like some of the most iconic perks we've ever seen in Call of Duty Zombies, and it was kind of crazy to have 2 brand new perk machines on a one map. This map also had the first ever main Easter egg quest in Zombies. Now, of course, there kind of was an Easter egg in Der Riese with the flytrap thing, but this was more of a main quest than that was. That was obviously way simpler. And of course, you do need 4 players for this Easter egg, and it's obviously very simple, but it was still the first one ever, and it was kind of crazy to have, especially at the time. A lot of people were just so curious about the story at this time. Like, this is when the story really started becoming something really, really big, where a lot of people were getting invested in the lore, and we learned a lot of the story on this map as well. The Thunder Gun returned to this map, which normally I would consider returning a wonder weapon instead of giving a new wonder weapon as a negative, but obviously this being one of the first ever Zombies maps, it's kind of hard to give it much criticism there, because even Der Riese just brought back the wonder weapon from Shinonuma with the Wunderwaffe, and the Thunder Gun is a really awesome wonder weapon, so obviously it's really fun to use on Ascension. And because of the addition of PhD Flopper, the Mustang and Sally was basically a wonder weapon in and of itself. It was the first time where the Mustang and Sally was really a useful weapon, because you can just spam it at the floor and you would take absolutely 0 damage. The Easter egg song on this map is probably one of the best Kevin Sherwood ever did, with of course Abracadabra. And I love the way this map begins with everything being in black and white, and then when you turn the power, the color appears. I think that's such a cool map mechanic. We've seen it happen once again, kind of with Attack of the Radioactive Thing in Infinite Warfare, but it was just such a cool idea at the time, and I really, really think it gives the map a lot of personality. The one thing about this map that I'm very mixed on is the space monkeys that come during certain rounds. I used to absolutely hate these guys because I thought it was pretty frustrating that they can steal your perks, but over time I've kind of learned different ways to make sure you can stop the monkeys from stealing your perks, whether it's utilizing the traps or just being at really smart locations on the map to make sure you can kill them before they even get close to the perk machines. And so I've kind of enjoyed them more over time, but I still think it can kind of be frustrating at some games, especially when you're playing solo, because it's very difficult to get all of your perks secured, especially if you have more than 4 perks. It's not going to be easy to secure all of them, but there obviously are ways of doing so, and so I do think it is an interesting mechanic that you can find ways to deal with. It's just a little frustrating sometimes. Overall, despite being a very bare bones map, I think it ends up being a lot better than the maps we've talked about on this ranking so far because it just did a lot of things right. It was really, really solid for its time, and when this map came out, to me, it was the best map of all time. I think it's better than every World at War map, and it's better than Kino, it's better than 5, so it was insane when it first dropped, because I was just like, oh my god, if this is what zombies can become, we are in for some good stuff in the future. Coming number 4 spot, I've got Rave in the Redwoods from Infinite Warfare. So we are finally getting to the maps that I consider to be like A tier and above. These are some of the best zombies maps of all time, and Rave definitely deserves to be in that conversation. I know a lot of people say that Spaceland was the only good map in Infinite Warfare, but I feel like a lot of those people didn't really give the DLC maps a chance in this game because Rave is really, really solid. The crossbow variant wonder weapons are really, really interesting. It's not like a usual elemental variant wonder weapon type situation because the actual crossbows themselves, they're very, very unique from one another. There's one that is like a dual wield crossbow thing where you shoot these little balls on the floor and each of the balls create this laser link with each other that instantly kills any zombie that walks over it. So it's a really unique wonder weapon that we've like never seen anything like this before. And then some of the other ones, obviously you have the acid rain, which is really, really powerful. There's one that basically acts like the thunder gun. It just kind of pushes the zombies back with this giant wind blast. And then there's the other one that basically has a lightning come out of the sky and hit the zombies. So there are some elements in there, but not all of them are. They're not like the same usual ones we see on other maps. So I really think these are fun wonder weapons to use, and they're pretty enjoyable to get as well. But technically they aren't the only wonder weapons on this map. There also is the Smiley chainsaw, which is essentially the same chainsaw that the boss uses on this map, and you can actually get this by completing the Easter egg, and it's a really fun weapon to use. You just slice through the zombies and you can shoot the little buzzsaws out of it as well. Kind of reminds me of the Ripsaw from The Darkest Shore. It's a really, really fun weapon to use. The Easter egg is very, very simple, but I would say it's a very fun Easter egg to do. I think it's good that Infinite Warfare has a lot of variety when it comes to the difficulty in their Easter eggs. You obviously have maps like Shaolin Shuffle and Attack of the Radioactive Thing that are much more complicated and difficult Easter egg quests, whereas a map like Rave in the Redwoods is very easy and simple. So I don't think this map being very easy and simple is necessarily a bad thing. It's just different, and I think it's still fun at the end of the day, and it leads to a really, really solid boss fight. Honestly, one of my favorite boss fights of all time against the Super Slasher. It's just a really well-designed boss with a really interesting arena to fight in. The Slasher boss itself is just really incredible because obviously you get to fight the Super Slasher version of it in the boss fight, but when you're just on the map itself, whenever you're in Rave mode, you will get to see the Slasher himself. He kind of just like teleports out of nowhere and comes at you with a chainsaw, and he can actually easily kill you. He's a really powerful boss enemy, but you will only see him in Rave mode unless you're doing the Easter egg. So that is kind of an interesting boss where it's not going to come at you at all if you're just normally playing the map. But when you're in Rave mode, you actually will get double points. So it's kind of this risk versus reward scenario where you can get a lot of points when you're in Rave mode, but obviously there's that looming threat of the Slasher itself where he can come get you whenever he wants. Just in general, I really like the map theme itself. It's going for this 90s slasher at a camp near a lake, obviously taking heavy inspiration from Friday the 13th, and I think that's such an awesome theme to do for a map. Never in a million years did I think we get a zombies map that's taking inspiration from slasher movies from the 90s, but this map does that, and it does a fantastic job at it. I also love how there's music playing in one very specific area of the map, which is the area where there's the DJ itself, and that's like the main party area of the map, but obviously you can explore other parts like the lake itself, you can explore the cabins, the mess hall. In general, I actually really like the layout of this map because it's like a giant circle that all leads into the middle mess hall area, and you can actually take zip lines from that main middle area to the different areas of the map to get around a bit quicker. There's also these little weapon charms you can get by doing these little side Easter eggs, and they actually give you like extra special abilities on top of the abilities you're already getting from the perks. My only criticisms with this map is that, first of all, I don't really love the Ghosts and Skulls quest on this map. It's probably the weakest out of all the Infinite Warfare maps. And then I also really don't like the long boat ride to get to Pack-a-Punch. I don't know why they had to do that. There should have been like a side Easter egg or something that lets you just instantly teleport over to that other island to get to Pack-a-Punch. I think that would have just kept the pace of the match a little bit faster because it's really annoying. Every time you want to pack a punch a weapon, you gotta now sit on this boat for like over a minute. All in all, Rave in the Redwoods is a solid DLC 1 map. It was a solid follow-up to Spaceland. Obviously, it's not as good as Spaceland, but it still was a solid follow-up. In number 3 spot is going to be Citadelle de Morts, and I was actually really debating if I wanted to put this above Raven the Redwoods or not. I ultimately decided that I do like Citadelle just a little bit better, but honestly this could change in a few months, who knows. Citadelle is a really fun map. Obviously the 4 elemental swords are probably what make the map as special as it is. I do think the swords could use a slight buff, but that doesn't change the fact that they are still really fun to use. They're really awesome looking, the design of them. I also really like the quests of how you actually get the swords. I would have liked a second quest to be able to upgrade it. I think that would make this map even better, but the quests themselves to actually get them, they're pretty fun and they actually flow really well into each other, especially if you're doing the main Easter egg. The way the Easter egg works, you're basically free to do really whatever you want in any order. You can start the wall puzzle first if you'd like, or you can start the sword upgrades and then you can get the incantations after that, and then obviously you have to bring it all together in the end and you get to go to the boss fight, which is honestly one of the best boss fights in Zombies history. It is a really awesome fight, really awesome arena, and it's actually quite challenging. The elemental incantations themselves are really fun to use. I love the idea of having these elemental wonder weapons, but then you also have elemental equipment that go along with each of the wonder weapons, and you can use any sort of one you want. If you want to use the electric sword but then have the fire incantation, you can do that. You can really mix and match however you want, and they're really easy to get because they're just available on the map in different areas and they keep recharging, so you can basically infinitely get these incantations as much as you want, and I think that's just really awesome. The map has a great soundtrack, probably the best map soundtrack since honestly Ancient Evil or Alpha Omega. The main thing holding back this map for me currently is all of the returning boss enemies. I don't like the fact that the vermin and the parasites returned. I don't like the fact that the amalgam returned. I like the doppelgast as a boss enemy, but I just don't particularly think it's that unique to be the only new boss on this map. I really wish we would have seen either returning bosses from like older Zombies games or just completely new ones that fit the theme of this map. Of course, the whole medieval theme. We don't have like any bosses that kind of fit that other than of course the main boss fight itself, but it would have been really cool if we had some like giant night zombie or something like that that came at you with a sword and a shield. Like that would have been really sick, and it would have obviously fit the map. They could have done a lot more there, but honestly, it's not the end of the world. The map itself is still really incredible. I also think the side Easter eggs are a bit lackluster. This is a common theme with a lot of modern Zombies maps where the side Easter eggs just aren't that rewarding. They give you things that just aren't that useful. For example, on Citadelle, there's a side Easter egg that gives you this giant chess piece that goes around and kills zombies for you, but it absolutely sucks at killing zombies. It barely kills any of them, and it doesn't even revive you. So what's even the point of doing this side Easter egg? It seems kind of pointless. And there's other ones that just give you extra loot, and obviously loot is useful, but it's stuff that you can just get by naturally playing the game anyways, like more points and salvage. I can just play the game and get those. I don't have to do the side Easter eggs for them. And I don't think the quests themselves are particularly that interesting either. Like usually they're just going around the map and holding X on a couple things or shooting a couple things around the map. They're just not that interesting. They're fun to hunt for sure, but I just don't think they're that interesting. Overall, this is a solid DLC 1 map and is really setting the stage properly for Black Ops 6's DLC season. I cannot wait to see what the rest of the maps are going to be like, because if they're anything like Citadelle, then we are definitely in for a good game. Coming in number 2 spot, I've got Dead of the Night from Black Ops 4. This map is so criminally underrated, and I think it's getting better and better over time. People are starting to come around on this map, because when it first came out, a lot of people didn't like it. There was a lot of hate for the map, and I feel like nowadays, I only really see positive things about the map, which is definitely a good sign. I think a lot of hate for the map comes from just the fact that people really weren't enjoying Black Ops 4's mechanics as a whole, and then for them to just drop a DLC 1 map out of nowhere without doing any marketing for it, it just came at such a surprise for so many people that they didn't even bother playing the map until like months later, when they already just didn't really care anymore at that point. And I genuinely do think that the no marketing thing for Dead of the Night was actually kind of an interesting way to go about a map, and I actually thought it made the map more enjoyable for myself, because going into a map without knowing a single thing about it is just an absolutely crazy experience to have, and it's something that we've really never seen ever since then. But this map is fantastic. It has some of the best atmosphere in any Zombies map ever, with this very spooky haunted mansion aesthetic that works so well with Call of Duty Zombies, especially when you include the boss zombies, which of course are werewolves and vampires. Like, you can't get cooler than that. I'm sorry. This is like the coolest stuff you can do for zombies, and they really do take advantage of it, especially when it comes to the actual visuals of the map itself. There are so many cool looking areas, especially the forest with the Pack-a-Punch. It looks absolutely gorgeous. This map is just stunning. all around. The Alistair's Annihilator wonder weapon is probably one of the most fun wonder weapons ever, and it's also really, really useful. There's also these 2 upgrade quests you can go on to make the wonder weapon even better. Obviously, you have to do this for the main quest, but if you're not doing the main quest, it's still worth doing just to make that weapon better. And I love having things to do on the map that are rewarding, so having 2 quests to upgrade the Alistair's Annihilator is just really, really awesome. And speaking of quests, the main Easter egg on this map is actually really, really great. I think there's a lot of fun, in-depth steps to this. One of my favorite steps is the Atlas puzzle. One of the most unique things they've ever done in Zombies, where you have to solve this puzzle by turning these different wheels and trying to make them match up perfectly with the lights. Now, unfortunately, there is a way to solve it every single time just by doing the exact same thing, by interacting with certain buttons a specific amount of times in a row, and I don't think that's a good system. I obviously wish that they had different ways of solving it each time, but it still is a really fun puzzle. The first time I'd solved this, it was like one of the most rewarding moments in Zombies for me, because this is an actual puzzle that is not like an easy puzzle to solve, and there's actual logic behind it. So it works so perfectly with the Zombies Easter egg formula, and I would love to see more things like this in future maps. The only step of this Easter egg that I don't like is the scratch mark steps. I think most people can agree that that step is a bit too much. There's just way too many locations for the scratch marks, and it can be kind of frustrating looking for them. I don't particularly find it to be that fun of a step. I don't think it's like that difficult either, but it's just one of those steps where you just could have made it simpler, and I think it would have been a lot better for more players. This map also does a great job with its side Easter eggs. There are 2 really rewarding side Easter eggs on this map, one of which is for the Savage Impaler weapon, which is actually really, really good to use against the vampires. It's not very good against the zombies, so it's pretty much useless for that, but you do get to use this against the vampires, and it will basically insta-kill them for quite some time. And the quest you actually have to go on to get it is actually really, really fun and really cool, because it unlocks this like secret room on the map that you can only get to with this side quest. Stuff like that I just absolutely love in Zombies. The other quest involves getting a wooden stake melee weapon, which is also really good against the vampires. It just completely demolishes them. It's not great against the regular zombies, but it's going to be great against the vampires, which are definitely bosses that are pretty difficult to take out. So when you have a weapon like this, it's going to be much, much easier. And the quest to get it is also pretty fun as well. There's also the silver bullets on this map, which you do need for the main Easter egg, but the silver bullets as a mechanic is so cool because it essentially gives your gun double tap, and it lets you go back to the silver bullets crafting table and just get more ammo for your gun whenever you want, of course, at a certain price. And I absolutely love this because it's a map unique thing that's only on Dead of the Night, and like I said, it just makes your guns more powerful, so you're just going to be killing the zombies a lot easier when you put silver bullets on a specific weapon. You also kill the werewolves a lot easier, and you actually have to do that for a specific quest in the Easter egg. So in general, this map is easily one of the most in-depth maps of all time with a ton of content to it, and I don't understand how anyone could possibly dislike this map. And the best DLC 1 map of all time is obviously going to go to Der Eisendrache. This is one of the best zombies maps of all time. It's not just the best DLC 1 map. There is so much that it does right. Obviously, the elemental bows is like the main appeal of this map. And what I love about these bows so much is that you have these really interesting quests to go on to get them. And they're really, really fun quests. I think all 4 of them is fun to go for. Some people don't like the firebow quest. I personally am completely fine with it. And obviously, all the bows are amazing. They look amazing. They sound amazing. Everything about them is amazing. The atmosphere is incredible. You have this snowy medieval castle feel to it, and I don't think it will ever get old to me. Every time I'm playing on this map, you can just feel it. There's so much personality to it. It's obviously very distinct from a map like Shadows of Evil, which of course was the launch map in this game. So when this map came out, it was just such a completely different experience, which is exactly what we all want out of a DLC map. It's also got a solid main Easter egg quest, one of the best Easter egg quests of all time. It's a pretty simple quest. I don't think it's like that complicated, even though I do like the complicated ones. It is nice sometimes to have one that's just a bit simpler, and this is one of those Easter eggs with one of the first Easter egg boss fights of all time in Zombies. It was the first like main big boss fight for a Treyarch map. Obviously, we saw a boss fight back in Descent with Exo Zombies. We technically had one in Shadows of Evil, and if you want to count Extinction, Extinction did a bunch of boss fights before Zombies ever did. But this was like the first like main big boss in a Treyarch map, and it was pretty huge at the time. People were absolutely loving loving it. Obviously, Treyarch has gotten quite good with their boss fights over time, to the point where this one isn't even in my top 5 favorites anymore, but it still is a solid boss fight with a lot of good mechanics to it. It's a very replayable Easter egg overall. These side Easter eggs are fun and rewarding. There's a side Easter egg where you can get a Panzer helmet, and it actually makes it so you take less damage to the Panzers, which I think is really awesome. The gondola is a fun mechanic where you can get free power-ups from, and even the second gondola can give you stuff like monkey bombs and a ray gun. Overall, this map just really doesn't do many things wrong. The only thing I don't like about this map is the fact that you can't get more than 4 perks without using gobblegums. It's a really unfortunate thing because the gondola was right there. Why couldn't they just make it so the second gondola has a chance to give you a perk bottle? That would have been the best way to do it, because then people would just grind out the gondola quest and just keep trying to get that second gondola as much as possible to get those perk bottles to get more perks. I think it would have been the perfect system that would have kind of reminded people of Origins a little bit with the perk bottles you get from the dig sites, but it just unfortunately didn't happen, and so you only can get more than 4 perks if you use gobblegums. That's definitely a negative for this map, but it does not hold back this map from being one of the best of all time. Overall, the DLC 1 for any Zombies experience is always going to be one of the most important parts of a Zombies game, because it sets the stage for the rest of the DLC season, and if it's a bad map, it can really turn people away from the game and possibly make them not even bother playing the rest of the DLC season. Let me know your guys' list in the comment section down below. I would love to hear what you think about my list as well. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Peace out, everyone.